Hello, you wonderful people, and welcome to another episode of Crime Centric. This being the show where I talk about crime dramas that I watch. For today's episode, I'm going to talk about the latest episode of Bull. So this week's episode, the team takes on the case of a boy named Troy who was basically sentenced psychiatric care because basically he killed his dad, but he doesn't have any memories of it. So it's like almost like an insane, like it's a situation where like, oh, maybe he kind of just went a little insane. So they wanted him studied and stuff like that. And Bull examines him and realizes like, oh, the reason why he killed his dad has no memories of it or whatever is because he was hypnotized. And obviously everyone has their reservations about like hypnotism and everything like that. But human Bull's like, it's not magic. It's just suggestion. Like, it's not just anyone is malleable. Like, obviously, this also being a CBS show, it's like, let's not forget The Mentalist was a show showing you just how easily it is to get inside of someone's head, making them think you're psychic and stuff like that. So, obviously, in this case, a lot of interesting story developments, especially when it came to Benny and stuff, because Benny's like, oh yeah, let me take this case, which Bull's not letting him, which I guess it still never really registered in my brain. Like, Bull has not let Benny do any cases since the whole, because he even referenced it. I think it's because I never actually saw the full episode because I saw part of it because like near the end of the episode it got cut. The one where he was defending that woman Erin, who he kind of got close to. I forgot what the case was about, but it was a couple episodes back. But apparently he slept with her. I didn't know that was a thing. I knew like there was a whole kissing situation, but I didn't know you actually slept with her. Maybe that was part of the episode I ended up missing. But he's like, I ended things anyway. But the thing is, like, Bull thinks that Benny's not back in the game, especially because Benny kind of, he's like, oh, you're going through a midlife crisis because Benny's gotten a bike or whatever. And Benny's like, no, I'm back. You know, I was going through some stuff, but it's like, I'm back, but I'm ready to get back to work, which Bull isn't. But it's like, in retrospect, it's like, yeah, Bull hasn't really let Benny kind of do a lot of the stuff. Even at one point during the mock jury stuff, like, Bull was like, yeah, let Reed do it. It's like, no, it's like, this is kind of my territory, so let me do this. So it's like, Bull's kind of like trying to give him the chance, so. A very interesting case, because obviously they have to prove to people, like, hey, being hypnotized isn't some, like, because, you know, a lot of people have a hard time believing it. Even when you have someone like a friend of Bull who brought this case to him in the first place, Amy, she obviously, like, was able to sway some people because obviously scientifically explaining, like, yeah, it's 100% possible. Which I also appreciate what Bull went through, like, to be, like, to kind of show people that they can be, like, you know, those suggestions can be made. Basically, he had everyone be like, so basically he had Reed, the lawyer, the guy handling the case in this episode, say red at a minimum 11 times. It's like, why? You know, because basically repetition is like, once you get it like circulate in someone's head, like red, they'll basically subconsciously like you have to do it enough times for it to kind of sit in someone's brain without them really knowing. It has to be something subtle. It can't be like something overtly that you would notice, but something like red, like obviously Reed just kept using examples like, okay, I'm ready. I was like, oh, her saying that it's making me red. It's like, oh, what's a particular song, huh? Like red, something by the Red Hot Chili Peppers. It's like, I appreciate the fact that you're doing that. It's like, cause I actually went on, I was like, okay, I'm gonna make sure. I think there was like one more he said at the very end. I can't remember what it was, but I tried to make sure. I was wondering if they were actually going to show you, like, if you were going to get to see all 11. I think they did like 3 or 4, but nevertheless. I also appreciate when Bull was like saying like, okay, they're trying to like, the prosecutors are trying to get gun owners on the jury because they're more likely to be harsher when it comes to punishments. They're more likely to be like, oh yeah, he's guilty because he did it. So it's like more harsher on criminals and stuff like that. In this particular case, you know, on Troy. And he's like, oh yeah, but we kind of want them on the jury too because we want them to look at Troy as the gun and as a person who like hypnotize him as the one who pulled the trigger. It's not the gun's fault. It's the fault of the person who pulled the trigger. And he's like, right, gun owners never blame the gun. And he's smiling and Bull's like, yeah, stop smiling. It's like, right, sorry. I guess it's just a situation where it's like, because obviously this is his first, like, in his words, like, on the insanity case play. But really quickly back to it, I appreciate the fact is that red thing did work because everyone in the jury started wearing red. Even the judge had a red tie. And even, like, Reed later on is talking to Mercy. He's like, yeah, I kind of didn't really believe Bull about that whole this whole situation, especially the whole red thing. It's like, she's like, really? Look at your socks. And he looks down and he's wearing red socks. I was like, wow, he got you too. Makes you wonder how many people in that room he actually got. Even like maybe the prosecutors and stuff like that. Because we did see like her kind of looking around and stuff. It's like, well, maybe later on she like looking. She's like, am I? I'm wearing a red bra or something. You know, it might be something like that we didn't get to see. But also in this episode, like kind of coinciding with the case is basically there's a group named Lemansky. It's kind of like a higher education learning alternative form of education thing, which Bull immediately goes, it's a cult. It's like, no, Amy's like, alternative form, it's a cult. You know, that's what Bull keeps saying. And so he sends Chunk and Danny to go investigate. And obviously, the leader of it, Thornton, takes a liking to Chunk. It's like, oh yeah, because Chunk is more open to it, but obviously Danny isn't. Which I appreciate the fact is that later on Danny's like, wait, what? They showed you a tour. They told me that there was no time for something like they lied to me. She took so much offense to it. It's like, and Bull's like, the fact of the matter is they see how like not open to this, how skeptical you are about this whole situation. They look at Chunk and they see someone very open-minded, but it's like she was so pissed. She's like, this is so messed up. They chose him but didn't choose me. It's like, even Bull later on, because she tells Chunk like, don't drink the Kool-Aid, and Bull's like, wow, I did not know that Danny would have such a problem with not being chosen. Which I also love what Bull had said to Chunk, being like, okay, so congratulations on joining a cult. Make sure you don't kill us all. Because I think because obviously, like, as you know, Thornton's very good at hypnotizing people. Like, he knows exactly what to say. Like, I think his power to read people was probably not as good as Bull's. But the fact of the matter is, he's like, he hears you, he talks to you, he gets to know every newcomer and stuff like that. And he talked to Chunk. It's like, oh, like obviously, you want to pick a direction in life, but obviously, obviously Chunk's like going from football to fashion, just like he knew exactly what to say, and especially like, it kind of sucked Chunk in, and Chunk's like, especially when they find out later on that basically Troy like wasn't meant to kill his dad. Killing his dad was an accident. Who he was really meant to kill was Thornton, because he was actually supposed to have a session with him that day, but Thornton canceled at the last minute. The killer didn't realize that, so. And there's even more point where even Chunk is like, oh, we have to warn him. Oh, man, his life could be in danger. And then Danny's like, wow, you really drank the Kool-Aid. It's just like seeing them butt heads like that, just kind of looking at each other, like kind of scoffing, just like look at each other. Which Bull tried to warn Chunk, but Chunk's like, no, I got this. I'm not going to be swayed in all this. And he kind of goes into, it looked like a sensory deposition. It looked like a sensory deprivation tank that he got into. Like, obviously, he's like, oh, yeah, this will help you and everything. Chuck's kind of feeling good. And then he kind of locks it. And he's like, so how long have you worked for TAC? Why did Dr. Bull send you to me? Figured him out and stuff like that. Which I guess we kind of saw that other side of Thornton, because it's like, oh, you're here investigating me. You're trying to vilify everything that I do. Like I'm some monster or something. Which, later on Bull's like, yeah, you kind of are. The fact is that you manipulate people. You hypnotize people into kind of playing on people's vulnerabilities. In this choice case, it's the fact is that basically he doesn't remember his mom. It was a subject his dad never really talked about, even ever showed him her face. But the fact of the matter is, that's something that Thornton kind of touched on and stuff like that. Like he knows like I said, he knows exactly where to go. So it's like seeing that side of him later on, almost being pissed at Bull and everything. It's like, oh yeah, you're kind of trying to, because basically they painted the picture to put it so that his daughter Rachel was the one that actually used Troy as a means of killing his dad, because they end up using her cell phone, having her call Troy, and the ringtone he had is what set him off, and he almost chokes Bull, but Bull's like, no, don't worry, I'm okay. But it's like, to him, it's like, oh, the fact is he got super pissed at Chunk. He was like, because Chunk's trying to defend himself. He's like, yeah, I was sitting here for that, but everything I've said to you is true. The fact is about how this all, Chunk was actually feeling good about what was going on between them, but it's like, Thornton was like, yeah, don't ever come back here again, because it's like, you're jeopardizing the sanctity of what I'm doing. Once again, Bull's like, you're just manipulating and hurting people. It's like, the fact of the matter is, his getting all in Bull's face about how oh, you're interfering with you look at us as just a cult and stuff like that. It's like, well, if Bull hadn't kind of figured this all out, taken this case and done what he's done, he wouldn't be there to tell you yeah, you might want to be careful because your daughter actually tried to have you killed, because remember, you were supposed to have a session with Troy. It was supposed to be you, not his dad. So how do you process that? So that's where it ends off. But obviously, it's obviously Rachel's being investigated later on. But it's like, it's kind of interesting because when they give the non-guilty verdict for Troy, it doesn't. You do see Thornton sit beside Rachel, so it's like that's got to be super awkward going forward. Mainly, it's because like they had a difference of opinion how the business wanted to run. He wanted to keep it small. She wanted to kind of expand. So I guess she just felt like it was necessary to kind of get rid of him because it's like, okay, oh man, you've had your time. It's time for me to take over this, especially because she knows hypnotism and stuff well. So it's probably like everything that he knows, she probably knows, and maybe even more. So it was almost like a not necessarily clear cut case, but it was a case where I feel like they didn't necessarily have to jump through a lot of hoops, like a lot of things that they normally have to come across. I mean, granted, more so than anything, they had to make people believe in hypnotism and stuff like that. So, but I do like the revelation that Chunk and Danny have at the end of the episode. Chunk kind of points out the fact is like, oh yeah, the reason like you and me, we're kind of sucking it, and Danny's like, what are you talking about? They picked you, but they didn't pick me. It's like, well, when you look at our current circumstances, the fact is that we follow a man, is everywhere. It's basically saying like, yeah, we are. The reason why you shouldn't feel bad is because technically we were both chosen for a cult, and that cult is the cult of Bull. So it's like, I mean, when you actually kind of break it down and think about it like that, that is kind of true that in that sense that that there's some validity to that. So that's kind of interesting. But on the other side of the episode, we had the whole like Amy's talking to Benny, and like there was a conversation. Obviously, he's prepping her for trial, and he ended up kind of inadvertently bringing up the question, like, "Oh yeah, the fact of the matter is, have you ever gotten anything wrong?" She's like, "Yeah, I'm basically almost like no person is infallible. That the fact of the matter is like, he's like, oh, but what if you make a bad choice? It's like, well, the fact of the matter is your record kind of shows like, hey, you're very good in this particular area, and the fact of the matter is that you are in a position that you've shown, your records show that like, hey, you know what you're talking about. So yeah, even if you make a mistake, it's because someone believes that you know exactly what you're talking about. And it's like, once again, it's like no one's like above making a mistake. But he's like, oh, but what about mistakes that are kind of too big to kind of come back from? Which, you didn't quickly go, oh, like obviously even partway through the conversation, you're like, Benny's kind of talking about himself. He's kind of, I can never think of the word when I need to. Kind of deflecting, I guess. I feel like deflect is not the right word, but nevertheless. And then Amy's kind of like, oh, you don't realize what this whole situation was, because at first he's like, oh, I'm sorry, I can't go on a date with you. She's like, oh, you don't realize why Bull brought me here, kind of introduced me to you. And I was like, the fact is, the moment she started talking to Benny, I had a feeling, I was like, are you? I was like, no. She was kind of like evaluating him from the very beginning. It's like Bull wanted him to talk to her like as a therapist. Which Benny didn't necessarily, he's like, why would you do that? Like, the fact is, like, hey, yeah, I messed up and stuff like that. Yeah, I slept with Aaron, I broke it up and everything. But the Bull's like, yeah, that was a symptom. That's not the problem. The fact of the matter is, you're not willing to talk to me. I just want you to have at least someone to talk to about this whole situation. I mean, granted, the only other person that really knows the whole situation is Chunk. But Chunk's kept his mouth shut because of, like, he knows at the end of the day, it's up to Benny to tell him. It's not his place to tell him, so. But we didn't get to see much of it, but Amy's like, yeah, she made a little progress with Benny, but not a lot. But, Bull's kind of like, I thank you for what little progress you did make. That hopefully that'll kind of be enough. Now, she ended up bringing something interesting. She's like, so the fact of the matter is, how are you, Bull? And he's like, oh, I'm fine. She's like, well, you can always have your original time slot. And he's like, oh, you just want me there so I can give you baked goods? Because apparently he's actually very good at baking, which I guess that's kind of like, I mean, it's kind of an interesting thing. Obviously, that's always kind of interesting when you find a therapist actually goes to therapy and stuff like that. But it's like, I mean, being the person he is, that Bull was able to get into people's minds. Like, you would think like, oh, someone like him actually goes to therapy, which is like, everyone has their issues. Even if you're a professional, it doesn't change the fact is that you can just as easily have issues as just as many issues as any other person. You might be, you might have a tendency, because the last thing you want to do is be that in that mindset and like have that, like be a therapist and try to self-diagnose yourself, because you're probably like, no, this isn't this isn't that. It's like, no, this isn't fit me, and you won't get the proper help you need. So maybe this is connected to a lot of stuff from Bull's past. Maybe it's all about maybe his and Isabella's divorce, dealing with the whole like losing a baby type of situation. Maybe that. Oh, I mean, granted, we don't know how far back their working history goes, him and Amy. Because she made it clear, to Benny, it's like, yeah, we never dated, we never slept together. It was like 100% professional, so. But what we do see is Benny finally opening up to Bull about it, and Bull's like, I got it wrong before. I said that I had a feeling that you lost faith in yourself. But it's like, no, who you lost faith in was me. And Benny's like, no, I haven't. It's like, yes, you have, because this is a situation where you should have come to me, but the fact of the matter is you didn't. And he's like, the fact of the matter is, I got your back on this. And he's like, but Bull, I'm not a client. He's like, no, you're much more than that. You're family. And you're not alone, Benny. And he says the day, I was like, yeah, being like, if they want to get to you, Benny, they have to go through me. Because even like Bull's like, the fact of the matter is you made a mistake. But Benny ends up bringing up the fact is that basically the night before the trial or whatever, he got a call from someone else that basically someone who fit this similar way that pattern of killing. Like there was another killing similar. So it's like maybe he got the wrong guy, but he was just so sure at the time. So he didn't want to think otherwise. So he's like, I got my guy. I definitely got my guy. So I saw glimpses of the next episode, and I'm excited to see a particular actor kind of pop up. Once again, who was the other one? Because I swear there was like a third actor from Banshee that kind of popped up in a second actor, because I saw a third actor that's kind of connected to Banshee. I was like, hey! But nevertheless, I'm not going to say who it is, but I didn't catch any of the previews. I just happened to see this particular actor's face. I was like, oh, you're going to be in the next episode. So it seems there are only 3 episodes left this season. So I'm very interested to see what goes on, especially because it seems like next episode might be dealing with the whole Benny situation. Maybe it's going to be a situation where it's like they're dealing with another case, but also the Benny situation. But it seems like the way they ended the episode, like Benny's case is going to be the main focus of the next episode going forward. So the team working together, trying to help Benny out of this situation. So overall, very good episode, but I'm very excited to see what goes on in next week's episode or the next episode, whichever case it may be. But really, that's all I want to talk about in this episode. Till the next time we meet, be happy, be safe, live life to the fullest, and enjoy it. Good day and goodbye.